Welcome to episode 20 of Real Health Radio.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey everyone, Chris Sandel here, and welcome to another episode of Real Health Radio. And today is another episode where I have a guest, and the guest today is Caroline Dooner. Caroline is the creator of the Fuck It Diet, the spiritual anti-diet and normal eating mentor, as well as being a writer and performer. She wants women to start taking up space, using their voices, and being body rebels. She loves all things mystical, spiritual, and creative, and lives in New York City. So I came across Caroline probably a couple of years ago through Matt Stone. She created a blog called The Fuck It Diet, and with a name like that, it was hard not to check it out. More recently, she's been doing lots of writing for Ravishly, and I've been really getting into these articles. It's been stuff I've been sharing a lot on my Facebook page, and so I got in contact with her, invited her to come on the show. And as part of the show, she talks about her struggles with food and how she used art and creativity as part of her recovery. So without further ado, let's get started. So hi, Caroline. Welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
That's okay. And so to start off with, why don't you give us a bit of background on yourself, how you got into this kind of work and your history of things?
Great. Well, like many people who do this work, I was totally crazy about food for really my whole life. It goes back really, really far. Even as a child, I was like a complete obsessed binge eater. I just felt denied. I felt like I didn't get cool snacks like my friends. And I was truly obsessed. But it wasn't like a big headache for me. I just like knew that I was obsessed with food and it just was what it was.
And was that because your parents weren't allowing you and giving you cool snacks?
Yes. There was a health food energy in our house. And like, it was just judged it was called junk, and they were just judged, and we didn't buy them, and we shopped at Whole Foods, and really we ate really well. Like, we had great food. I wasn't starving by any means. I just felt denied. It was just like a feeling of not having what other people got to eat. And so I would go crazy at friends' houses. And whenever I had a chance, I just remember, like, I thought about it all the time. I really, really was obsessed with food. But yet I was thin, so nobody gave me a hard time for it, which is, good, I guess, but not fair for the other kids who will be the same, but just because they're bigger, they are, there's a whole extra pressure younger. But I didn't have that when I was young. But I would say that I was a binge eater as a child, for sure. But when I turned like 13, 14, 15, puberty time, that I started gaining weight, and I was like, oh my God, this won't do. And I started dieting, like really, really, fad diets. I would do the Atkins, I did the South Beach, I did all of these different crazy things, blood type diet, acid alkaline. And I would just, it just began that binge repent cycle, because I was already a binge eater. I already felt denied on another end, and now I was denying myself even more. It was like me saying, all right, I'm going to cure this binge eating disorder I have. I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to get some control. And I just, like, it truly became top of mind, dominated my life. Like, it was my top focus. And I just felt so out of control for 10 years. So from like 14 to 24, was my diet. It was just a constant diet or a constant, binge in reaction to it. And I never had anorexia or bulimia officially, I mean, I didn't have those, though, you know, when you're real, like I would go through periods of extreme restriction.
Yeah.
But I never looked anorexic, which is like almost how they categorize it these days, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it was really just an obsession with what I put in my body and what I looked like, for 10 years. And then, you know, during times it would definitely be that orthorexic label where it was extreme obsession with the purity of food. On top of that, actually, when I was 14, 15, I was diagnosed with PCOS. And I don't know if your readers will know what that is, but it's a hormonal imbalance syndrome that, you know, if you look at the symptoms, it's pretty scary sounding. And so everything that I was doing felt really responsible because of what they say to you when the doctors diagnose you, or at least when they diagnosed me, it was like, okay, just don't gain weight and watch your carbs and fat. And
don't have too much sugar is always the common one, PCOS, because of insulin resistance and whatnot.
Exactly. Don't have too much sugar and exercise and, you know, don't gain weight and we'll put you on the pill. And so it just started this like, oh my God. And my mom was really freaked out about it too. So she, you know, this isn't the thing to do for a mom to help her daughter go on diets, but it felt like this health thing that was so important. But it really spiraled out of control. But in a way, unfortunately, that no one could tell. Like it just seemed like I was into healthy eating. But I was like so obsessed.
Could you tell? Because I think like sometimes there's the facade of I'm doing this for health, but when someone's truly honest, they're like, you know what, it was really about weight and it wasn't so much about health.
It was definitely about weight, but I would say for the first 4 or 5 years, I definitely had no idea. I was a teenager. I thought that this was normal. I knew that my friends weren't really doing it like I was, but I thought that this was sort of just like the way that it had to be. My mom was really into diets always, and I just sort of thought that it was responsible and that it was important for my health. I thought that my reaction to the dieting was strange. Like I knew how I really was a binger, and I was just so upset with myself for that. But I thought that, again, that it was just my fault and that this was just something that I had to continue to like work through in order to like get to some amazing destination of perfect food control. But then when I was 18, I read an article actually about Catherine McPhee, who was on American Idol. And it was this article in a women's magazine, but it was about how she had bulimia and she went to this rehab center, and it was all about neutralizing food and not being afraid of food and letting yourself eat. And it recommended the book Intuitive Eating. And I was like, oh my God, I think I need that. I think I might have a problem. And so I bought the book and I started reading it, and I was like, this is what I need. This is so like, I am obsessed. I am, you know, crazy about food. And so I sat down with my mom and I was like, Mom, I know that, you know, we always talk about how I have this food addiction, but I really think that it's important for me to do that. I'm reading this book, Intuitive Eating. I think it's really important for me to become normal with food. So I'm going to be eating foods that are like bad foods, but like there's a reason. I had to like breathe. It was right before college, so I was still living at home, and she was very involved and worried about my crazy eating.
Yeah.
And her response was, okay, all right, you know, whatever you need to do. However, I'm going to be a little bit more strict with my eating because I have cancer. I was like, what?
Oh, gosh.
That was supposed to, I know. Brilliant timing. So, of course, you know, within the week, I was a raw vegan as well, like she was trying to be for her cancer. So she's absolutely fine now. And she actually, side note, raw veganism was not the thing to be when you are doing chemotherapy. That actually really screwed her up. And she had like serious nerve damage because of it. So if anyone has cancer and is thinking of doing raw veganism and chemotherapy, do not do them together. Eat more protein.
I mean, I don't work with cancer patients, but from what little I know from friends or from other people who've gone through it, like when people are doing chemotherapy, eat whatever food you can get in.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Most people really struggle to keep food down, to have an appetite, to then be restricting it to veganism or raw veganism. I mean, it's going to be so difficult.
I know. And she, I think not too long into it, she was like, you know what, I need salmon, I need potatoes, I need like she was craving all these things, and so she went off of it, which is great. I'm so glad that she did. But I think even the time that she spent on it, and then for the other times she was like, well, I'll just eat this way when I'm feeling okay, and that really wasn't a good idea. But of course I was in my first year of college being a raw vegan, and I would come home and be like, why are you not? Because I was like, truly, I had been drinking the Kool-Aid. Like, I was like, this is the only way. You have to be 100% raw. It's going to heal everything. All of our problems are from eating cooked food. Our body can't handle it. Like, I was totally, in the cult of raw veganism for a year, and then I got out. So basically, I had this small awakening that I had a problem with food, and then under extreme stress, I went right back into my dieting, where I was like, this is going to save everything. This is going to save us. This is going to make me like perfect angelic being.
Yeah.
And then after that, I was like, wow, I'm really crazy with food. I need to learn how to eat normally. And so I had like a couple years then of doing this kind of pseudo intuitive eating, where I was like, if I just listen really, really, really closely to my body, I'll be skinny. And so it was this like weird version of like French Women Don't Get Fat, that book. I don't know if that's a thing in England, but it was a big thing in America. And like just like obsessive intuitive eating. If you
turning intuitive eating into a diet,
into like a rating your hunger like in this obsessive way. And then I sort of thought that I was like healed because I could eat whatever I wanted, but I was still obsessed with it. And then I decided to become paleo. And I was like, I'll become paleo, but I will do it really sanely. And I will not get obsessed with it at all. And I'll just do it casually. Because I knew that I had this obsessive diet thing that I like thought that I was healed from. And within 3 days, I was truly insane about it. And I knew it was happening. And I didn't know. I was like, well, I'll just do it for a month. And then, a month turned into more months. And then finally, on my birthday, I was binging on almond flour cupcakes that nobody else would eat, and these squash pancakes that I was making for myself as a treat that I'd never made before and were truly disgusting. And I had like an awakening of, oh my God, like you are never going to stop doing this. You're just going to keep chasing this elusive whatever you're looking for, and it's never going to get better, and you really are obsessed with diets, and you keep doing this. And in that moment, I just had this understanding that it was all about weight, that weight was the thing that was keeping me from normal eating or thinking or trying to control weight, essentially. And that was the thing that made me unable to eat intuitively in the past, that I really was trying to restrict all the time, and that it was detrimental to my brain and my metabolism and the way that I related to food and the way that I ate. And all my binging was coming from this restrictive, physically restricting, and also, this mental constant like guilt thing that was always in my head. Because I'd just been paleo and trying to do the GAPS diet too on top of that, and being like, okay, I'm just going to eat broths for 2 weeks, and then I'm going to add in sauerkraut, and then I'm going to add in like I was truly, and I was trying to heal my hormones. I still was, and I still honestly am. Like I still, that is a constant, and now that weight and food aren't an issue for me, it's kind of, it's not nice, but it's interesting to see like, hey, this isn't necessarily that diet dependent. Like this probably has other factors. Now that my weight is low and stable and my eating is totally normal, I still have these hormonal things, and they're actually better now than they were before, now that I'm like feeding myself a lot. But it's kind of liberating to be like, hey, this is actually just a genetic thing that I don't have to feel so guilty about all the time.
And so how long ago has it been since you had that awakening, and then started to eat normally, and I use normally in inverted commas, and shifted the way that you think about food?
Mm-hmm. That was almost 4 years ago. And I would say it took maybe a year and a half to 2 years. And then it's almost like there was a new level of understanding about the way that I related to food. Every couple months, I'd be like, oh man, I'm still thinking about this weird thing this way. And then I would like let it go or do the work to let it go. But it took I would say a good 2 years to become actually normal with food and not so scared of it. And it just took so long to remind myself that the habit of trying to eat the smallest amount possible was so ingrained, and that it really wasn't serving me, because it was this constant like manipulation of my hunger. But almost immediately I started eating more, and I was still afraid of gluten. I was like, okay, I'm going to learn to eat everything, but maybe not gluten. so I would, and it really, like, paleo and GAPS are really, really against gluten. And so I just believed that for maybe 6 months, I was convinced that that was the cause of all of my problems, and that if I could just cut it out, that everything would be fine. And I did. And everything was not fine. It didn't do anything helpful for me. I know that some people actually are gluten allergic or sensitive, but I was not. And I remember this family that I used to work for, they were making a dinner, and they invited me, and I couldn't give up the control. And I told them, I was like, well, I'm paleo. I lied to people and said that I was gluten sensitive, and because I believed that I was, but they were like, okay, great. We'll make I like that kind of food. They were like, we'll make all these root vegetables, and we'll make meat, and I still couldn't give up the control. This was right before I decided that I was crazy. So this was like a couple months before, but they were like putting like spices in the food, and I couldn't deal with the fact that I didn't know what the spices were. I truly freaked out, because everything that I ate felt like life or death. It felt like I was like, it all mattered so much. And that if I couldn't do it perfectly, that I would, ruin everything that I'd been doing, and I would never be healthy. But, anyway, so it was, it actually took a really long time for me to reintroduce foods, slowly but surely. I kind of started with dairy because I was reading a lot about, do you know Ray Peat?
Yeah. I like a lot of his work, but again, probably not the person that someone with eating issues should be reading, exactly, because of how much there's good and bad foods within his philosophies.
Completely. However, I will say that on the sugar end, it was really helpful for me.
Definitely.
Because that was the thing that I was the most scared of. And it just kind of gave me the information, or at least the like way of looking at nutrition and sugar, that was like, oh, okay, this isn't actually, maybe this is what I need. Maybe this is potentially therapeutic for my body at this time, at least. So that really helped on my fear of sugar and carbs. And I was reading a lot of Matt Stone at the time, and he was sort of like still against grains at the time, and kind of coming out of his paleo-ish bubble. But I knew that maybe eventually I would add in even more foods, but just so I could actually take some steps, I was like increasing my amount of food by a lot. I was eating grains. I was eating out at restaurants, and I was eating things that were fried, and, I was petrified of those oils because that's a big paleo thing. But it was like I was slowly adding things in, proving to myself that everything was fine, knowing how important it was for me to kind of get over it, because I knew how anxiety, based it all was. And then I would say in May, I actually remember, in May, I was out to dinner with my parents. I had just done a show in Philadelphia, and it was closing day, and they came and they took me out for dinner, and we went to a French place, and I ate a piece of bread and butter, and it was such a big deal. And they didn't know it was a big deal, but to me, I was like, yes, I'm moving into bread. And that was the day that I told them that I was never going to act again, because I still had this show. I already had booked the show before I decided to learn to eat normally. And I decided at the same time that I needed to quit performing, because it was, again, that was another aspect of my food obsession. It was this health thing, and then it was this weight performing thing, I believed. So that's why there were all of these reasons that I had for why it was so responsible, in quotes, for me to be obsessed with my food, because I had this health stuff and I was a performer, and it was really, really, really important that I look a certain way, or else, everything's screwed. So I decided that I was quitting, at least for a time, if not forever, because I just couldn't do this. I couldn't recover with that pressure. But another thing, I didn't even mention this. I decided when I had that epiphany that I was going to learn to eat normally, and that it had to do with weight, I decided I'm going to eat and normalize my eating and let myself gain whatever weight I have to gain. I actually had this feeling that I knew it wouldn't be, for me, I knew that it wouldn't be exponential. I knew that there was a cap on it, because I already was a binge eater. I would yo-yo all over the place, but I never, it was always between, 20 pounds, 20, 25 pounds maybe. I just knew that it wouldn't go up and up and up forever, though of course that was an irrational fear that I had. But I knew that it would be, with normal, quote unquote, but that it probably would be higher than I thought was acceptable in the past, and I was ready and willing to accept it. And that was a huge component of the recovery, because that's what I was completely unwilling to do before. Before it was like, nope, if I'm not skinny, I don't want to live. I don't want to, nothing's worth it if I can't do that. And finally it was like, no, actually nothing's worth it if that's all I care about. And I made the decision. And that doesn't mean that it was easy. I was petrified, and I had all this body dysmorphia, and I thought about it all the time. And it was like a constant reframing of no, it's okay. This is normal. You're normal. It was hard, but it was so important. It was such an important part of what I did.
And I mean, whenever I'm working with clients in this area, getting that place of weight neutrality is super important, because I don't think you can be normal, in inverted commas, or non-crazy around food if you've got this constant fear of, but I'm going to gain weight. The two just go hand in hand.
No, you can't be, because that really is the root cause of I would say 99% of disordered eating, that is the root cause. The thing, and it's really hard. The people that I work with, there are people who come to me who are ready. They're like, I have been obsessed for so long. I finally realized that, it's not worth it. And even though I'm scared, I'm ready to just accept, wherever I fall. And that's what I want to do. And I'm ready to do that. And then there are the people that come to me and they're like, I'm obsessed with food. I don't want to be anymore. I kind of understand that I should be accepting myself bigger, but I don't, and I won't, and I can't, and I refuse to. And it's like, okay, I get it. believe me, I get it, because I had my years of me trying intuitive eating and kind of pseudo being like, yeah, sure, I can trust my body, but it better not eat a lot. And like, I just was unwilling. I just was completely unwilling to accept being bigger. Like my beliefs were so, ingrained that is unacceptable. It's unattractive. It's unhealthy. It's lazy. It's, it was all these things that I really, really believed to be true. And so I couldn't, and I wouldn't budge. And what it came down to, and what happened in that, in that epiphany is what I call it, was kind of a shaking up of those beliefs. And I really was so miserable. Like, I'd been doing it for so long and trying for so long and failing for so long. And it just was this moment of like, it's never going to get any better. This is what it is. Like, this will be my life if I keep doing this. And I can't, the thing is that I can't give that moment of truth to people. I can only kind of like talk around it and hope that it brings them to it themselves, because I cannot, you and I both can't force that desire for self-acceptance on people. That's the hard part.
Yeah, and I think, and I talk about this with clients all the time, is there's almost this leap of faith where you have to just be like, okay, I'm going to just trust this. I'm going to try it out. In the same way as when people talk about hitting rock bottom. Like, everyone's rock bottom is different. I read different autobiographies and different things. And there's times where you're reading someone's book and you're like, how is this not your rock bottom yet? And then it goes on further and further and further.
Yes.
But so everyone has that point where it's just like, you know what? I cannot do this anymore. And the pain of changing becomes less than the pain of staying where they are.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, it's just hard because you don't know. I mean, if I think back to all of those years that I knew I wanted something else, but I truly was not ready to take that full leap of faith. I almost had to do it wrong so many times in order to know that what I was doing before doesn't work, which is so hard. And I can kind of see that in some people that I work with. I'm like, you need to potentially experience this not working a couple more times before, you have to trust that there's something else.
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's hard because all the writing and all the inspiring in the world can only, become seeds in people with disordered eating's minds. It can start the process, but that big leap of faith really does come down to needing another way. And also something that was really helpful for me was starting to, the whole body positive movement really was essential because it opened my eyes to our whole cultural weight obsession and all of these really twisted ways that we look at ourselves and we look at other people, and this kind of like subconscious way we look at weight that I had no idea. I was just operating under it, Yeah. It was just my truth. It felt like, unfortunately, for a time, it was my belief system, and it was just the way the world was to me. And kind of pulling the veil back really, it allowed for kind of an empowering, part of the journey. This part that was like, this kind of angry part, this rebellious part of like, I cannot believe that my life has been so ruled by these things that are just so arbitrary, these beauty standards and all of these subconscious correlations between weight and worth. And I got kind of angry, and that was really helpful actually for my journey. And I knew that anger wasn't like the place to stay, but I also knew that it was kind of an empowering, liberating, important part of the process, because it allowed me to not be what I knew other people expect of, us, and wait, and the actor thing for me too, because I was like, well, I'm never going to be an actor again. I'm never going to perform again. But I'm going to be an advocate for actors and performers to not have to look a certain way, because I just realized, like, I can't believe that I have these beliefs on how I have to look, and actors feel like they have to be tiny to portray humans. Like, I just got so angry. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I can't believe that that doesn't make any sense. We're not, I mean, you can argue models the same thing. Why do they have to be skinny to be humans in clothes? But I'm not even being a model. I'm trying to be somebody portraying real humans, and I still think that I have to be a certain way. And it was all like this thing, because I'm a singer as well, and I have a sweet voice, and so I was always like, well, if I'm going to work, I have to look tiny and sweet in order to sing, with my voice. And I had this realization of what that means, that how I am isn't real. Like, that I'm not, I'm like denying the fact that I actually exist as somebody who's not necessarily extremely tiny and sweet, that you have to be tiny to be sweet. It was like all of this stuff that I was realizing, like, what is this? This is all messed up. And I know that there's so much still, subconsciously in my brain that's going to keep, coming up. But like, I am ready to kind of deconstruct this and be a voice for the other side. That was a big help for me, because it kind of gave me this counterforce to the diet culture, that it was like a little purpose and a new passion and a new way of looking at it.
I think that's a really big change that I see in clients as well, where they'll read something that previously would have triggered them to think, I want to go on a diet, I want to do more exercise or whatever it may be, and instead they read that and they get angry. And they get angry that this myth or this story is being perpetuated. And I'm a big advocate of health at every size. I don't agree with everything it says, but the movement as a whole I genuinely agree with. And just starting to get people to move away from, as you say, all of those lies about weight.
Yeah. And I think that the anger, and I think sometimes the anger scares people. They're like, oh no. But I think it's so healthy. And if you allow it to express and feel it and allow it to kind of move you forward, it'll pass. It'll serve its purpose. You're not going to be angry for the rest of your life. But it's this, it's what they call righteous anger, and it's really healthy, and it's really helpful. It really, really, really is. That, along with looking at body positive people and activists and seeing different shapes and sizes, and really just like, I did a whole media purge of every other thing that I used to follow, and I only follow, very supportive, inspirational, body positive people. And it makes a huge difference, because my world that I've created is this amazing, inspirational, spiritual, open world that, that's crazy to say that like the world is in social media, but what I experience every day when I go online are these amazing, uplifting things. And it really, really shapes the way you look at things. It really does. And it's something I recommend to absolutely everybody who wants to do this and go on this journey, is to follow body positive blogs and Instagrams, and really, really helps.
Yeah, because I mean, what you're doing on a micro level is doing what the environment does to us on a macro level. So you're changing all the messages that normally make you think I need to be thinner, or I need to lose weight, or I need to eat a certain way, and instead creating something where your beliefs become the most likely outcome of what you're exposed to. So if you're always exposed to body positive stuff because you set it up that way, then your beliefs are going to be more likely to go down that route. And the thing with beliefs is beliefs come first, the supporting evidence comes second. And so if you're...
That's so true. That is so true.
And so if you can then set that up and you come to those beliefs, you're going to find the stuff that then supports that.
Yes. It's really... just all the people who have said, well, I just know that I look better when I'm thin. I just know that I need this. I don't know how to... I know it's true. Like, I feel like you're lying by saying that it's not true. And it's like, you were taught that. Yes. You believe that because you were taught that, but it is not an inherent truth. We were completely conditioned to think that way. And, the reconditioning is a process, but once you do it, it really does prove it that it's all so learned.
I mean, you look at, the best way to prove that to someone, look at different cultures around the world. Like people who stack rings on their necks, or people who put scars on their bellies, or whatever it may be. And you look at that and you're like, that is so weird. Why would you ever do that? And then you would imagine telling those cultures what we do. And they're like, why would you ever do that?
It's so true. And even I think Isabel Fox and Duke said this too, but even just the fact that every few years the fashion fads change.
Yes.
And we actually start to see new things as being attractive and the old things as being unattractive when we used to think that they were so cool.
Yeah.
That alone is proof that we can change what we think is attractive.
Totally. Like, I go back and look at what I was wearing 10 years ago on like Facebook photos. And you're like, my God, why did I think that was a good look? Exactly.
And the funniest part is what we're wearing now. We're like, this is it. This is cool. Yeah. And in 10 years, we're going to be thinking the exact same thing. We're going to be like, what was up with those pants? What was I thinking? And it just means that none of it is right or wrong. It just, as far as clothes go, but it's just, it's all very subjective and arbitrary.
So, you mentioned the comedy and the acting side. I know you are quite big about using creativity and the creative process of helping women recover. So do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yes, I do. So the other thing, and this was completely just coincidence, but at the exact same time, or actually it was a couple months after. So it was while I was doing that show in April, May. So I had my epiphany, I would say, in January, on my birthday. And then I had a couple months where I knew I was trying to eat normally, slowly but surely, adding more foods, reading a lot of, Matt Stone, reading Health at Every Size, reading all of these things to kind of strengthen my resolve. But I was depressed, legitimately. Like, I look back and I just watched so much TV. I was kind of in this limbo because I knew that in May, I was going to be going to Philadelphia. I live in New York. I was going to be going to Philadelphia, where my parents live, and doing this show that I'd been cast in that I was so excited to do. It's such a shame. It could have been the absolute time of my life, but I was really not in a good headspace, and I was really anxious, and I was really trying to do these big changes with eating and everything. But I had these months in between, and I was like I was depressed. I was like in this limbo. But as soon as I moved home, my mom was in this book club, and they were reading The Artist's Way. And I had already told my mom that I was not going to be acting anymore, and that I was going to, I don't remember whether I told her that it had to do with food. I can't remember. Probably in like little different conversations. I like slowly got it all out there. But she came home one day and she said, Caroline, I know you're quitting and I totally support that, but I am reading this book called The Artist's Way and you have to read it. It is for you. She was like, I feel like I'm reading it right now because you should read it. And I was like, no, I don't want to. And she was begging me to. And she got it on my Kindle because she didn't buy the book in time. So she downloaded it on my Kindle and brought it to the group. And she kept on telling me to read it. And I was like, fine. I started it. And it truly, I still stand by this. The book changed my life. It totally changed the way that I look at almost everything. But the book is all about creativity. And it's about using creativity, well, both as kind of like a therapy, as a therapeutic thing in your life, but also it's for professional creatives, how to foster creativity in a kind of, it's like a methodology of having structure in place in order to play, essentially. But it's also for people who don't consider themselves to be creatives. And that is kind of the cool part where I think that it works really, really well for eating disorder recovery or disordered eating. But there are lots of exercises and there are lots of kind of mind shifts, but it really is a way of looking at creativity as this spiritual force that we're kind of collaborating with. But it also does so much work on perfectionism because, I mean, disordered eaters are almost certainly always caught up in extreme perfectionism. And it normally is not just related to their body. Normally it's in every other area of their life as well, in their work, in anything. Truly. And you can become perfectionistic about the way you write a letter to someone or talk, choose a restaurant for lunch, and this just really, 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 and it's a 12-week, there are 12 chapters and there are 12 weeks. And, this book, particularly The Artist's Way, and at every end, it's just trying to loosen up our perfectionism. This idea that we have to do it perfectly or we shouldn't do it at all is really soul killing. And it's really bad for creatives and it's really bad for everything else in our life. And so it's kind of like this awesome way to loosen up, essentially. And I can't even, it really, really, it changed my life and it continues to be the work that I love to focus on with the people that I work with. And I have a 6-month life recovery program and it's a lot of practical stuff about eating and metabolism. But the most important work that we do is kind of getting out of our own way and figuring out where we're being perfectionistic, where we're keeping the stakes too high, where we're not using our voice, where we're just like, I really, really think that finding creative outlets will help you move forward in this process, because when eating and body become your entire identity, it's almost impossible to step away from it because you're stepping into this like unknown of, well, I'm nobody now. I can't step away from this identity. I was the thin one. I was the healthy one. I was the one who always told other people how to eat. And it really is scary for people. And what I found is doing this creative recovery work really helps that transition and ongoing, because it kind of opens you up to all of these, buried dreams and little passions, and helps you find a voice for yourself, even if you're not ready to share it, even if sharing it isn't really your thing or your goal. It helps you figure out who you are. And who you are will change and morph, every year for the rest of your life. But figuring out who you are, what you care about, finding new things to focus on, finding new things that are fun. And it's also this kind of active meditation as well. People talk about meditation all the time and how important and helpful it can be for any kind of recovery. And this is the same thing, but it's kind of creative practices, and writing are meditative in an active way. And it can be really, really therapeutic. And so that is my favorite. It's my favorite thing.
I mean, it's something I recommend with clients as well. I think that a lot of the issues around food and body are someone's coping mechanism. And having creativity can be that new outlet for someone as a coping mechanism.
Oh, yeah.
And
for sure.
So I'm often encouraging them to do that, and also not just do it when like shit goes bad. Like, okay, like I'm having a stressful day, so I need to do it now. It's how do you start to put that stuff in your life in the good times and the bad? And so I'm regularly getting people to do writing, or get into doing some drawing, or playing an instrument, or some kind of creative task. There's a great either one book or a couple of books, I can't remember, by a guy called Daniel Pink, who's written a lot about creativity, again, from both the business aspect, but also just how to create a better life through doing it, which I would highly recommend checking out. He's got a really interesting TED Talk as well on creativity that's probably worth having a watch of.
Cool. That is exciting. I always like seeing new people who talk about creativity, because my new big one is Elizabeth Gilbert, and she wrote Big Magic.
I've heard that reference loads. I know who Elizabeth Gilbert is. She's got also an amazing TED Talk, but I haven't read that. I haven't read that book, but everyone's talking about it.
It's a great book. It's an easy read. It's super inspiring and cool, and it's another neat way of taking the pressure off. Again, it's all about, really so many things come back to the perfectionism of taking the pressure off of being this perfect, amazing, admired, successful being that, it really keeps us small when we feel like that is what we have to live up to. And it applies, nearly word for word for eating disorders and disordered eating. And, because I saying eating disorders is maybe alienating, because, many people I wouldn't have been diagnosed maybe with an eating disorder because I was never underweight. I never had the things you think about. So the people that I work with don't technically have eating disorders, even though I would say on a spectrum of eating disorders, we absolutely do. But I say I do have people who have anorexia who are helped by the things that I write and are helped by my work. But really what I'm doing is the next phase. It's the phase once you feel stable and are not under eating. It's that next step into more food freedom and that kind of like new level of self-discovery, recovery. So, however, it's hard because it's a blurry line between what I was and what eating disorders are. And, many women are somewhere on that spectrum. So, and men too. I mean, truly, it's like, I don't know, how do you find that it's more women?
I definitely find it's more women. It's women who are coming into my practice. But that's not to say it's not happening with men. It just is that they're not the ones that find my writing and find me. But I would have no issues working with men. I was actually talking with someone about this the other day, a fellow practitioner, and she was like, I don't really want to work with men because she's female and she didn't feel that it was right for the approach that she deals with. So she said, look, anytime people approach me who are men, I'll just send them your way. And I'm more than happy to do that because, I mean, as a guy, I know the pressures that are on men in terms of how they should be how they should look and what it means to be a man and to be masculine and all of that. And I've had to learn the other side for women, so I can obviously do that now. But yeah, I mean, it comes so much more naturally talking about it from a man's perspective.
Of course. Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me because a lot of the things that I do talk about are very specifically, female experiences. Even though I know that my general message is for everyone, I know that my work really is tailored towards women's experiences in the world with weight and all this stuff. That makes a lot of sense to me. Well, I will do the same, actually. Okay. I will send men to you as well.
Perfect. So that would be great. So, I mean, at this time of year, we're in the holiday season. Definitely a time where people can feel really powerless around food. It's a lot of anxiety being driven, worrying about, am I going to put on weight? What's going to happen when I get to Christmas dinner or that kind of thing? I mean, what advice or suggestions would you be giving to people at this time?
Yeah, it's such a funny cultural thing. It's such a weird, this is the time of year where everyone gains weight. And it's in the air. And it's like you grow up knowing that that's a thing. And it's very strange. But so what I say is that this looming January 1st, where so many people are saying, all right, well, January 1st, I'm going to be really good and I'm going to, cut out all of these foods and I'm going to go to the gym, 6 days a week and I'm going to really become this awesome version of myself. So for now, I may as well keep eating a lot of food. That is the guilt repent cycle just blown up in this weird holiday and resolutions thing. And I truly believe that so much of the holiday overeating comes from this impending diet that we all think has to happen on January 1st. I mean, I know for me, I would diet in the fall and then I'd be in binge land, in November, and I'd be losing control and being well, I'm going to be good on January 1st, like everyone else. So it just made November and December this big binge where I thought I was well, it's going to end, these cookies are going to end. And then I'm never going to be able to have cookies again because I'm going to become so good at dieting that, it's never good. And it's just this, I think that is the reason why so many people feel this lack of control around food. And of course, these are the people who tend to diet in general. The person who's saying I'm going to get a gym membership in January and it will be fun to take, some dance classes. Those people are probably not the extreme dieters and the extreme, bingers who are stuck in that cycle all the time. So they're fine. They're probably relatively normal with their eating. And I'm not talking to them. I'm talking to the people who are, have a diet mentality all the time.
Yeah.
And because of that, this looming resolution, the January 1st, January resolutions are this diet. They know, their body almost knows what this means. And we kind of go into this crazy food fixation. And I think it's this, I don't know. I maybe you can actually speak to this as well, from your perspective and your expertise, but there is a big connection between the brain and the body when we're talking about restrictive mindsets. You know, it almost makes you hungrier. It really makes you look for food. It makes you kind of go nuts around it. And so what I say to people is consider not having a weight-related resolution at all. If you want to do resolutions, make it a positive thing. Make it about adding something into your life. Make it about something that feels good and not restrictive and kind of punishing. And if you are trying to control your food and trying to control your weight in this kind of obsessive way, you're going to feel out of control around food all the time, especially during the holidays when it's this like amped up thing. So it really comes down to getting rid of the restriction and getting rid of the impending restriction, which really can screw us up in the moment now. That's what I say about holiday eating.
And I agree with you definitely on that. And it's the impending restriction that most people don't really think about. Like, they can understand, and it's really easy to understand from a physiological perspective. If you don't eat food, your body starts to get more hungry, and it makes changes so that you eat food. And people can get that, but they don't realize that if there's an impending food shortage coming up, i.e. I'm going to go on a diet or I'm not allowed to eat these foods in the future, that can cause the same reaction. And if you're looking from an evolutionary perspective, that makes sense. There were times where we would have abundance and there are times where there wouldn't be any food. And so if we knew a famine was coming up, it would make total sense to be able to eat more.
Yes, absolutely. And the craziest thing is just how this phenomenon that dieters experience of like, I'm obsessed with food. I think about food all the time. I'm so hungry. I can't stop eating. I'm cold. I'm tired. I'm miserable. All of this stuff is a biological response to restriction or perceived restriction. Like, that's actually what happens. And it makes perfect sense. If you actually were in a famine, that's exactly what should be happening. You should be thinking about food all the time. You should be, going out and trying to find food all the time. You should be thinking about it all the time. You should be hungry. You should be, tired. You should be like conserving energy and looking for food, essentially. But now, when we're constantly going on diets and constantly fighting that response, and so upset about it, it just becomes this spiral that we can't get out of, but we have no idea why it's happening.
And I think personally, the reason why it can be so much more difficult for people to accept that is because they have this expectation that weight should be so low.
I know.
So there's this idea of, well, how can my body need to be saving up for a famine? Because look at me, I'm already huge. I have all these stores, etc.
I know.
And so that then makes it more difficult for someone to get their head around. Whereas if we didn't have this expectation that everyone should be so lean, then that basic physiology would make more sense.
Exactly. So it really comes back to this, like, this cultural shift that needs to happen for our psyches around food. And I don't really see it happening. I see it happening in a really long time. Once we have sort of collectively as a culture been miserable, like the same way that a dieter will need to kind of fail so many times at dieting before they're willing to accept that there might be another way. I feel like as a culture, unfortunately, we're going to have to like do this. I wish we didn't. I really wish that we could wake up right now, but I think people are just so not on board with this health at every size movement, and the fact that being super lean is not the best thing for everybody, that we're going to have to kind of struggle a little longer before any real big shifts start to happen.
Well, look,
which sucks.
You're more positive than I am. I honestly don't think that it will happen where there is a big societal shift. I think it will happen within pockets, but there's so much that has to happen for that to change, and so much capitalism that is then invested in people staying in this mentality that I really don't see it shifting for a very long time, if ever, which is really sad. But it's the same way as we have so many cultural myths about what creates happiness in terms of, if I have more money, then I'll be happy. And that, again, is also not going to die anytime soon.
It's very true. I mean, I'm talking like in my vision, hundreds of years. I don't see it happening quickly. But I know. But so basically, what can we do? We can only do the work that we're doing and encourage other people to do the same, you know?
Yeah, of course. But yeah, just I don't see those changes happening in my lifetime or your lifetime, which is very disappointing, but that's unfortunately the reality.
It is. And accepting that is potentially helpful, just that we both know what we're working with, basically, and our expectations aren't too high of everybody understanding what we're talking about. Yeah.
So you've got, I know you mentioned earlier on, but there's a program that you've got called Life Recovery, which I believe starts in January. Do you want to just talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. Well, first of all, I have a mini course that's free, that's 10 days long, and it kind of it breaks down my philosophy and gives you an exercise per day to kind of put it in place. And it's a lot of rating exercises, some practical ones as well with food and body, but it'll give you a good taste for my method, and it'll hopefully help and start this process if anybody, wants to really do this. And that's a taste of my longer 6-month program, which is one lesson with exercises per week for 6 months, because it is a long process, and I feel like a shorter program just wouldn't be able to kind of see you through at least one leg of the change of the journey. And I have a Facebook group for the program, a private Facebook group, and it's amazing. The people are just so supportive, and it's been, I've only run it once so far. So we're nearing the end of the first cycle. And so the second cycle, starting January 1st, is enrolling now. But if anybody wants a taste of it, you can come to my site. I assume will you link?
Yeah, I'll put all the links, cool. But I mean, you're more than welcome to say what your site is and where to go.
Oh yeah, have we even, I guess you would have said it in the beginning, but it's thefuckitdiet.com. Have I even said that yet?
No, you haven't, which is strange. For a diet with that name and a site that name, we probably should have brought it up before now.
I know. Well, it's the Fuck It Diet. And my mom hates it. And thefuckitdiet.com, you can sign up for the mini course. It's like all over the site. You can't miss it. And I'm in there too. I'm in the free Facebook group, and we talk about all the exercises, and I highly recommend anyone do that. And then if you want even more support, to join us for the 6-month program, which is enrolling now. Actually, it's too late to say this. So this is the last day of the early bird, but you might have to cut that out because it's not going to come out today.
It will definitely not be the last day because this is not going live today.
Right, exactly. So anyway, I recommend the free program to get a taste for what the 6-month one would be like, but I'd love to have anybody who is wanting to go on this journey and do all the practical eating body stuff and also some creative recovery stuff too.
Awesome. Well, look, it's been fantastic talking to you, Caroline. You've got such an interesting story about all the different things that have happened in your life and how it's led to where you are now. I know you just mentioned the website for people to go to. You've got your Facebook page as well, your normal Facebook page as well, that people can be checking out.
Yes.
And what's the Facebook link? Do you know?
For the fuck it diet?
Yeah.
It's
Is it just /fuck it diet? I mean, I'm going to put in the links anyway with the show notes.
The F-it diet. So THE, I think, hold on. It's THEEFFITDIET. I think I wasn't allowed to have fuck in the URL of Facebook.
Okay.
But you'll be able to tell that it's mine by the page.
Perfect. Well, look, as I said, it's been wonderful chatting with you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7health.com.